Hello, this is Paul Bergin from the Mars Hill blog, which you can find at www.paulbergin, that's PaulBurgin, .blogspot.co.uk. Today I'm continuing my series of vlogs on political heroes of mine who I think helped change society for the better. And this particular vlog is about Lyndon Johnson, the 36th President of the United States. On the 27th of November 1963, LBJ, in one of his first public appearances as President, addressed a joint session of Congress. The first such meeting since President Kennedy had been killed less than a week before. And among his first words were, "All I have and all I would give, not to be standing in front of you here today." Johnson became president in circumstances neither he or anyone else would wish. He did harbour high ambitions, though, and he was quite an incredible politician in his own right beforehand. It's important, though, to point out his faults as well as his successes. He could be a bully, quite an unpleasant bully. He had issues with people who had grudges that needn't have taken place, and yet at the same time he cared deeply about ending segregation, cared deeply about education for all, he cared deeply about health for all, and that showed through. He came, it's said, from a poverty-stricken family, but they were a fairly well-to-do family. In the state of Texas, he came from a small political dynasty within that state. I think his father was the state legislature. And in the 1930s, he was, such was his early success within the Democrat Party, he was known by President Roosevelt. He became a congressman in 1937, and quite an able one, and became a senator in 1949, very soon leading the Democrat senators in the chamber. He became Senate Majority Leader in around 1955. But it was around that time he had a massive heart attack. He had months of recovery, but it meant he had to live with great care for the rest of his life. And he is known to have heart disease. From that point, he never really fully recovered. He made a bid for the presidency in 1960, and he could have succeeded but for the Kennedy bandwagon. And it got quite vicious between... He, as I said earlier in an earlier vlog about Bobby Kennedy, JFK's brother, Lyndon Johnson and Bobby Kennedy detested each other. Really detested each other, and that came pretty much to a head in part during that 1960 campaign, Bobby Kennedy being his brother's campaign manager. But JFK was more pragmatic. He knew that he had to reach out to LBJ, and he offered him the chance to be his running mate, which LBJ, after I believe some hesitation, agreed to. There followed a fairly quiet nearly 3 years as Vice President, but he was very dutiful. He was very good at keeping links open and persuading people where President Kennedy couldn't. But when he became president, he showed enough tenacity and strength, sometimes in areas where Kennedy was lacking. He pushed forward that civil rights bill in a way Kennedy perhaps couldn't have done. He brought in a war on poverty and brought in further education in a way that's benefited millions of Americans. He has done much to help the poor and vulnerable in the United States that still exists today. There is still widespread poverty in the US, there's still widespread difficulties, but Johnson made it a lot easier to combat that and to give people a better chance in life. Where he failed, and failed badly, was Vietnam. He accelerated the troop movements, he accelerated American involvement, and as many of us know, that did us no good at all. He joined early 1968, Eugene McCarthy and then Bobby Kennedy announced they're running for the presidency. They did very well. Initially, to the point where Johnson knew it was going to be difficult to even get the nomination, let alone the presidency, in being re-elected to a second full term. He wisely stood aside. And the rest of his life was spent in fairly quiet retirement, but protecting his legacy with the library, and also bringing forward further discussions. A month before he died, he had a civil rights symposium at his presidential library. This was December 1972, and he reiterated the issues that held dear to him as president, that he still had that fight within him, even though he was already so severely ill of heart disease. Even Johnson knew he had so little time left. And of course he died from a massive heart attack in January 1973. Johnson was in many ways flawed, not least with Vietnam, not least with some aspects of his personality. But his grit and determination to bring forward education, health, eradicating poverty, bringing something the closest America has had to a welfare state, has done much to enrich the lives of many Americans, and that should not be forgotten.